So increasingly, it's looking like the path to a deal between the US and Iran runs through Lebanon. Today, I want to look at three of the key players involved: Israel, the US, and Iran. Iran, firstly, because it said this on Monday.
We have emphasized and continue to emphasize that the ceasefire in Lebanon is an inseparable part of any ceasefire and of any final agreement to end the war.
Iran also apparently halted indirect negotiations with the US after Israel ordered troops to go deeper into Lebanon to fight Hezbollah. So Donald Trump stepped in and spoke to Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu and Hezbollah. And this was the result. A Truth Social post by Donald Trump, in which he's talking about having a productive call with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and also talking to representatives of Hezbollah, and essentially agreeing, with both parties agreeing not to attack each other. And more importantly, Benjamin Netanyahu agreeing not to send troops into Beirut. It's in this last part that things get interesting, because according to reporting by Axios, to get there, Trump lashed out at Netanyahu in a very testy phone call. We'll bring up the text in a moment. And this is apparently what was exchanged between the two men, coming from the side of Donald Trump. You are expletive, crazy. You'd be in prison if it weren't for me. I'm saving your expletive. Everybody hates you now. Everybody hates Israel because of this. That was reporting from Axios. Now, what you were reading there is what Trump apparently said to Netanyahu. We don't know if similar sentiments were conveyed to Hezbollah. But let's look at Israel and what is driving Netanyahu's push deeper into Lebanon. To help me do that, we're joined by DW's Middle East analyst, Shani Rozanes. Shani, based on that reporting from Axios, is it fair to say that Donald Trump thinks Netanyahu's actions in Lebanon are jeopardizing his chances of a deal with Iran?
I think it's definitely fair to say. We need to keep in mind it's only one report. We don't really know what came exactly between these two, but it is clear that there's growing frustration on all sides, definitely the Americans, definitely in Israel, about where all of this is heading. Trump is trying to push out. I think it's quite clear. He already last week announced there was an imminent attack that was planned, and he stopped it last minute. So the Israelis are pushing forward. They want to see more military actions. Trump is very, very reluctant. They also have different position. Trump is looking at, first of all, we have the midterms coming, but also looking at world economy, where it's heading, and Israelis are in a different position in the sense that this is an ongoing struggle. Israelis are in this mindset starting October 7th, 2023. So we are almost reaching 3 years. And the way we're seeing also with Israel growing frustration is that there's not enough achievements, and they feel like we just need more force. We just need one more attack, one more, if everybody's about to collapse, we just need to put more pressure on all fronts to finally get where we want to be. I don't think this is a view that is definitely seen the same way in Washington. And we're seeing this daylight coming between Netanyahu and Trump, and it's growing.
A lot of things to discuss there. Let's try and look at the strategic reasons behind this push into Lebanon. I mean, the stated aim is to basically make it safe for residents of northern Israel. And earlier, that push was set to extend till the Litani River in Lebanon. Now, increasingly, residents further north of the Litani River up to the Zahrani River are basically being asked to evacuate and prepare for any potential attacks. And Netanyahu is also threatening to attack the southern parts of Beirut, something which for the moment at least appears to be on hold. I think the question I have for you is, how far does Israel need to go into Lebanon to make it safe for the residents of northern Israel?
Well, it's a great question. It's the question that Israelis have been debating for more than 40 years. Israel had invaded Lebanon all the way to the capital in 1982 already, and then it remained in Lebanon in the what they call then a buffer zone, basically a part of Lebanon, of southern Lebanon, that Israel occupied for almost for 18 years up until the year 2000. And the goal back then was to secure the well-being of the Israeli citizens along the northern border, all of the northern part of Israel. But that was not fully successful. Israel had eventually withdrawn after Israeli soldiers became, came under constant attacks by Hezbollah. There's a lot of research showing how the very occupation, Israeli occupation of south of Lebanon, was the one fueling the growth and the success of Hezbollah in south of Lebanon, being the defender of Lebanon and Lebanese ground, Lebanese sovereignty, and of course the Shiite community living there. So Israel has been debating, this question of how to secure the northern part of its, of Israel and the well-being of its citizens along the Lebanese border for decades without actually finding a good solution. And where we are now heading again into a ceasefire that will freeze the situation, bring some calm for a while. And the growing frustration among Israeli citizens is that we are not seeing any fundamental change. And there was a feeling for a while among Israelis after Israel in the summer of 2024 managed to weaken Hezbollah. It seemed there was a very famous Beepers operation where many operatives were hit, and then soon after, the leader of Hezbollah back then, Hassan Nasrallah, was attacked by Israel and in his bunker. So the feeling was Hezbollah was degraded. Hezbollah is is wounded and beaten, and finally we'll see a fundamental change in the situation. But this has not happened. We're seeing that Hezbollah has managed to recover and is still very agile, still very defiant, still very active in its pursuit against Israeli citizens and the northern border, all the way down to Haifa. It's basically 1/3 of the territory of Israel, and we don't really see real solutions. And this is the frustration. And Israelis keep saying, they're playing on who is, on one hand, they're fighting Hezbollah. On the other hand, the solution they feel should lay on the Lebanese government. And we need to understand that the Lebanese government is very weak. There's also attempts by the West and also by the Americans to try and strengthen it. But there is no doubt that the weakness, the very of the political system in Lebanon is the one causing Hezbollah to flourish and basically hindering any attempts or any actual attempts to disarm Hezbollah, to strengthen Lebanon, to manage, to have other forces, positive forces, Lebanese forces that will overtake Hezbollah and its influence and what it's doing, supposedly in behalf of the Lebanese people, but basically in behalf of Iran, being a proxy of Iran and its Shiite, axis in the region.
Okay, back in Israel, to go back to the point that you made earlier, Shani, about this feeling that nothing is changing, that things are not happening on the ground, and therefore maybe another operation will potentially change things and facts on the ground. And I just wanted to bring in what Israeli Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir posted on X, and he said that Netanyahu should have essentially said no to Donald Trump's demand that he hold off on attacking Beirut. Does Ben-Gvir represent somewhat the political pressure that Netanyahu is under to widen the offensive in Lebanon, ostensibly to see some results on the ground?
Well, Ben-Gvir is the fringe, most right extreme part of the Israeli politics, but in a way, he is now representing a wide majority of Israelis who feel like there's no way forward. There's no real progress when it comes to any of the fronts. Gaza is still frozen. No real achievements have been seen in Iran. We also see polls from the last week showing that Israelis don't believe that Israel can defeat Iran, and has definitely not won this last war. So this is definitely, an impulse that we can see in growing among other people in the society, which would naturally will not be seeing themselves represented by Ben-Gvir. But what we're seeing is the growing frustration in Israel that it's not, all these fronts are still open. No real achievements have happened. No real strategic change in Israel's positioning or in solving, some of the most chronic problems, defense problems it's been dealing with for decades. No real moves have been made. Israel is actually not better off. Actually, we are all, Israelis feel like we are in this perpetual cycle that is not moving anywhere. And there was a lot of hope that Trump, with his backing of Netanyahu, with the close ties with them, might be able to, help Israel get a strategic change. This is also partly why we've been hearing Trump in the last week mentioning the Abraham Accords, trying to look into the horizon, trying to build something bigger, and in the sense of a regional alliance. But we don't see Netanyahu appetite too big for that. We also need to keep in mind this is election year. Israelis are going to the poll within 3 months. So Netanyahu, definitely people on the right like Ben-Gvir are, breathing down his neck. He's very much aware of it. He needs to sound tough. He needs to sound that he's not, that he's not backing down and that he's actually concerned with finding solutions. We see that, this is going back to what we started with. Israel feeling that one more push, another blow will be the one helping. But also need to understand eventually this crisis has real consequences and real grounds for it when it comes to the Israelis and the way they see it. The Israeli North, people living there, thousands of citizens that are under daily attacks. What do you do? How do you defend them? Those who, I know we look at Iran, there's a lot of complexities in this war and what Israel has been engaging with in the last years, but eventually it comes to Lebanon. The way that Israelis feel is, what can we do? Are we just supposed to be sitting here and let Hezbollah, in behalf of Iran, in behalf of itself, just bomb us daily? There's no life, we cannot ignore the suffering in Lebanon. We cannot ignore the fact that it's about a quarter of Lebanese who have been evacuated. There's constant barrages, there's constant fighting. All of the life in the southern part of Lebanon has also been disrupted. But Israelis are saying we are forced to do that because there is no other solution. The Lebanese government gives us no solution because it cannot face Hezbollah. And we are now facing alone this terrorist organization that is the proxy of Iran. And if we don't defend for ourselves, we have nothing, or nobody else that can help us. And this is where we are, where, Israelis have been in this dilemma for so many years without real solution. And I think some of the frustration that we're seeing on Trump's side and the Americans is that there was a feeling that this government in Lebanon is actually different, is actually interested in trying to curb Hezbollah and force it to de-arm, trying to strengthen the Lebanese army. And the feeling is that what's happening now on the ground is fueling support for Hezbollah. The more Lebanese are suffering, the easier it is for Hezbollah to portray itself as the defender of Lebanon, and therefore weakening the government and strengthening its own position.
Okay, increasingly it almost looks, Shani, that what happens in Lebanon and what happens with Hezbollah is increasingly linked to how the deal between the U.S. and the U.S. and Iran pans out or not. Does Israel and by extension Benjamin Netanyahu feel he has been sidelined in this process, given that the U.S. and Israel had attacked Iran together to begin with?
I think it's fair to say we don't really know exactly what's happening there, but there is no doubt that the intimacy that Trump and Netanyahu shared at the beginning of this in late February is not where we are at now, because so much has gone awry in a way. The easy success maybe that they were assuming they will get is nowhere to be seen, and that there's a problem here that Israel actually built itself into this place that it chose to couple the Iran and Lebanese fronts together. On 2nd of March, Iran, as a response to the assassination of Khamenei in Iran, decided it needs to respond. It shot very few, what we would almost say symbolic attack towards Israel, and that was the choice for Israel. Are they going to contain it? Are they going to say, okay, we see it as we can predict it, but we can contain it because we want to focus on Iran? Or are we using this as an opportunity, as they have chosen? That's the way they framed it. We're using it as an opportunity. There was a trap we set for Hezbollah, and now we will finally get away with it, and we can then bring them down to their knees and get rid of them. And by creating this coupling between the Iranian and the Lebanese front, they are now kind of back themselves into a corner that Trump, trying to stop Iran, is also forced to stop Israel in Lebanon, and their hands are tied there. And there's a lot of awareness in Israel to the fact that the one calling the shots for Israel is Trump, and Israel has in a way kind of relinquished its complete sovereignty on its defense decisions by creating this coupling. And now it's clear that what's on the line for Iran and Trump is much bigger, in the vision of Trump, than what's on the line for Israelis when it comes to Lebanon. And Trump does not want to sacrifice the Iran deal for the sake of what he sees as a much more minor problem in Lebanon.
It's an important point you make, Shani, because I did want to ask you, does that therefore give Donald Trump more leverage over Netanyahu than the latter would like for Trump to have?
I think so. I think in general, if you look at the leverage in the area, there's very little leverage Trump has on Iran. There's very little leverage Netanyahu has on Iran or on Lebanon and Hezbollah in that aspect. I mean, all he has is the military might of Israel, and that has been proven in the last 100 days almost of this war to be limited in scope, very effective, but not
Right.
all that it takes in order to bring Iran down on its knees. So what leverage does he have? I mean, and in that aspect, Trump's leverage on Netanyahu is quite big because he is the one calling shots on all of that. And he has also mentioned that we've seen in the tweet that there's also the personal element, and he's using that. Trump has been actively lobbying for Netanyahu to get a amnesty, to get clemency for his legal problems in Israel. He's been putting great pressure. Trump has been putting great pressure on the Israeli President Herzog for that purpose, and he is kind of making sure to remind Netanyahu that he can be the one helping him, or has been the one trying to help him get away from his legal trouble. And just to show you the fragility and the weakness of Netanyahu in his positioning right now, completely in the hands of Trump, and Trump is making sure that Netanyahu and the world knows who holds the cards in this game.
It's always about cards when it involves Donald Trump, isn't it? We'll leave it there for the moment. Shani Rozanes, DW's Middle East analyst, thanks so much for joining us today.
You're welcome, Biresh.
So that was about the US and Israel. Let's talk about Iran now. We already went through the clear Iranian demand that any peace deal also has to include a durable one in Lebanon. It's therefore worth just listening to Iranians on the streets of Tehran about that.
The Lebanese stood by Iranians in Iran's darkest hours, and they supported us. You could say they brought themselves into this war, and they should be supported. In my view, we have a collective responsibility toward them. From the very beginning, we said we stand with Lebanon, we will not abandon Lebanon and remain by their side. That's in our national interest and what Iranian people want.
Now, that was from a rally that was organized in the Iranian capital, Tehran, and we can't independently confirm the circumstances under which those sound bites were taken. But let's talk about what Iran wants. Let's bring in Dr. Siavush Randjbar-Daemi, a senior lecturer in modern Middle Eastern history at the University of St. Andrews. Welcome, Dr. Randjbar-Daemi. Thanks so much for making the time. Why is a durable ceasefire in Lebanon so important for Iran?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Hezbollah has been very much Iranian since the mid-1980s, when it was devised to counter the Israeli occupation of Lebanon after 1982. And it is really the most substantial, I would say, proxy or ally, or anyway, Arab force friendly to Iran in the whole Middle Eastern region. So Iran clearly has, you could argue, both emotional and strategic ties to Hezbollah, which obviously outlast the assassination of two, actually, of its previous secretary generals, Abbas Mousavi and then, of course, Hassan Nasrallah by Israel. And it's simply unwilling to see Hezbollah flounder under what are effectively two challenges now.
So,
of course, we have...
Yes. Sorry, I thought you'd finished, but I just want to have a follow-up question on Hezbollah. You talked about, the leadership being decimated in Hezbollah. Hezbollah now has a new leader, but then how much help is Hezbollah really for Iran at this stage, given the decapitation strikes that Hezbollah has faced, and how it almost appeared that Israel had crippled this militant group?
Well, Israel certainly dealt very serious blows to Hezbollah. And I would say the Iranian insistence on Lebanon, of course, being included in this broad, if you want, deal with the United States points to the fact that Iran is concerned. If this Israeli military offensive continues into the next weeks and months, there could be a further weakening or decimation of Hezbollah. However, Hezbollah did manage to regroup after the very severe blows it with at the end of 2024, it was not just about the assassination of Nasrallah and all those other senior officials, but it was also the loss, effectively, of Syria after the fall of the Assad regime and the very important ties between, of course, took part in the Assad governments, on the Assad government side during the Syrian civil war. And of course, Syria was a main route for replenishment. So Iran, again, doesn't want to see Hezbollah disappear. But we have to forget that it's not just about Israel here. It's also about the new authorities and the new government in Lebanon. President Joseph Aoun and Prime Minister Nawaf Salam, they're very determined to strip Hezbollah of its military dimension and effectively turn it into, if you want, a pure political party. And this, of course, has been contrary to the ethos of Hezbollah as a multidimensional organization, if you want, doing anything from providing welfare in southern Lebanon to, of course, remaining armed and occasionally confronting Israel militarily, through to being, of course, a political party with parliamentary deputies in Beirut. So it is because of all these challenges that Iran, at the moment at least, is seeking a ceasefire. So at least Hezbollah is left standing after this latest round of military confrontation with Israel. And remember, these military confrontations with Israel are usually a matter of weeks or months. For example, in I think it was 33 days in 2006. So I don't think that Hezbollah would be comfortable with a military confrontation going on for a matter of months. Particularly in its current state, it would be a very severe challenge.
Okay, then isn't Iran making things worse for Hezbollah, given that Iran sometimes appears close to a deal with the United States and then sometimes it appears it is further away? I mean, if you're sitting in Tehran, given the amount of damage that has been caused to Iranian civilian and military infrastructure, and when I say somebody is sitting in Tehran, I mean the powers that be sitting in Tehran, given this much damage that Iran has faced, wouldn't it make more sense to agree to a deal now with the United States and then deal with Lebanon at a later stage?
Well, the problem is, of course, balancing all of this, because it is true that Hezbollah isn't the only factor in Iran's dealings now. Iran has problems of its own completely unrelated to Lebanon or Hezbollah. Primarily the economic situation that is now worsening at a very rapid pace, according to statistics released by the Iranian authorities themselves. It needs to really find a way to manage the rather firm American demands on uranium enrichment. But again, at the same time, when it looks at its regional policies and it looks at any form of containment or any form of challenge it can face to Israel, because of course Israel isn't part of this deal. So Iran has to have some form of leverage, has to have some form of ability to try to contain Israel, and that ability won't be through the diplomatic table, because there's absolutely no form of diplomatic channel going on between Iran and Israel. It has to go through proxies and through continued military threats, at least. And even if there is a ceasefire in Lebanon, that ceasefire in Lebanon has to happen without Hezbollah, as we said, being completely annihilated. So that's why I think Iran cannot really move on with an agreement with the United States without ensuring that it will maintain some form of level of leverage dimension or front as well.
Okay, but do you get the sense that, or at least Tehran gets the sense that it is in the driving seat when it comes to any negotiations with the US, that it can potentially outlast, at least politically, the will to continue on a war with Iran in the United States?
Well, there's no war going on since the 8th of April. So clearly things have moved to this stalemate in the Persian Gulf, which I think is the main theater now, really. And Iran is trying to leverage this because, of course, the situation we see now in the Strait of Hormuz was something that Iran had threatened for a couple of decades, at least. But it has really put into motion from the 28th of February. this sort of leverage will not be long term. Other countries will think about, sidestepping the Strait of Hormuz, finding alternative ways for energy exports. At least the countries that have the geographical capabilities to do so, such as the UAE or Saudi Arabia. So it has to extract maximum leverage from the currency. I don't think that Iran can sustain this level of blockade and this level of sort of control, if you want, over the Strait of Hormuz in the I don't think that this is something that can be sustained over 6 to 12 months because, of course, there's the problem of the US blockade and the impact that has on the Iranian economy. So it is, I think, in the best possible case, Iran can extract leverage on it in the short term. And that sort of leverage is in terms of sanctions relief, the unfreezing of assets, and, of course, some form of arrangement on the nuclear issue that will be palatable, which of course hasn't happened yet.
That's what Iran, that's what the best case scenario for Iran is. But what are its red lines then? What is it something that it will absolutely not compromise on?
Well, the red lines at the moment appear still to be this issue of uranium enrichment and Iran insisting on keeping the capability to or enriching at very low levels. It is unclear whether it is really accepting a moratorium. The Americans, from what we know, again, remember, this is all material that has been leaked to the media. One of the problems of this negotiation is that this is not a direct negotiation of two sides sitting in the same room and briefing officially on what they're doing day by day. So media leaks, we're getting a lot of accounts from mediators leaking. So it is very fragmented. But what we have is that the Americans are asking for a 20-year moratorium. The Iranians apparently are only contemplating 5 years, but they want to keep the capability to enrich uranium, which, of course, remember, is on a technical level baffling because Iran doesn't have the reactors to where this enriched uranium can be fed. So it is really a matter of identity, and it's a matter of remaining steadfast to the sole principle that Iran has to master the nuclear cycle. More as a psychological or identity trait rather than having an actual technical need to do so. But this is where we're stuck, and we don't seem to have made any inroads because apparently the Iranians are not buckling on this, and the Americans are insisting that nuclear dust, as Donald Trump puts it, i.e. the enriched uranium, which is apparently buried under the facilities bombed last year, has to be shipped out. And we occasionally hear about countries like Kazakhstan that could host this uranium, but nothing concrete has come out of that. So one key thing. And the other thing is the sequencing on freezing of Iranian assets. Iran has billions of dollars stashed across the world in assets it can't access, but are actually Iranian, money deriving from oil revenue. And that is very complicated from a financial point of view. It is not just a question of two governments agreeing to do this. The mechanics of actually unfreezing these assets are very complex as well. And this, of course, adds another degree of slowness, if you want, to the process.
Just one other question, Doctor. The Iranians have complained of so-called constantly changing positions on the U.S. side when it comes to negotiations on any potential framework or peace deal, whatever you like to call it. But is the Iranian regime united? I mean, who is calling the shots in Tehran when it comes to these negotiations? Is it the civilian government? Is it the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps? Who is calling the shots in Tehran?
Well, first of all, this whole point made of shifting goalposts, I think, is a direct product of the format of these negotiations. When you have mediator or more than one mediator, in this case, it seems, Pakistan, Qatar, maybe more stepping in, you obviously have a lot of inefficiency going on, and governments thinking that the other side is saying something, the Iranians thinking that the other side is saying a specific thing, but it then turns out to be a bit different from what they actually believe this to be. So, a lot of this probably would be resolved by actually direct negotiations in Islamabad or elsewhere, but those haven't happened for a long time now. Right. Then, with regards to, with regards to the rest, the problem remains that the two sides, first of all, have a high level of distrust. Second of all, much of what is happening now isn't really a deal. We keep talking about it as though this is a deal that will actually resolve the issue. It's really setting a framework for what appears to be 60 days of intensive negotiations. And as the media accurately puts, a memorandum of understanding. The problem of the memorandum of understanding really guarantee any form of outcome. With regards to Iranian leadership, there must be divisions coming up because there must be people who look at the economic situation in a sanguine manner. These are the same people that, for example, don't prevent very bleak economic statistics to be published. For example, the government of Masoud Pezeshkian has stated that war damage is in the region of $300 billion,
right,
whereas what we know in terms of military expenditure amounts to $29 billion. So the implication of producing these figures is that these $300 billion have to be found from somewhere. And some people wistfully think that this can come out of, for example, imposing tolls on the Strait of Hormuz, which is almost impossible if you think about the money involved.
right.
And then others have a more pragmatic view on the fact that uranium enrichment has to be traded off for reconstruction and resolving the economy. Others probably think that this sort of tension going on at the international level, particularly around the Strait of Hormuz, and these constant rallies that we see on the streets of Tehran, the segment you showed of two people participating in those rallies, in a way puts a dampener on domestic protests, big domestic protests like the one we saw in January 2026. So carrying on this tension, there's no free lunch here. Everything has a cost, but this policy of carrying on with the international tension, if you want, at least dampens or lessens the possibility of a massive domestic protest happening.
Right.
However, that being said, the economic situation's deterioration could bring economic riots or forms of unrest or protest in the near future.
We'll leave it there for the moment. But thanks for joining us today, Dr. Siavush Randjbar-Daemi. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
So how does all this end? Will Israel rein in its operations in Lebanon? Will Iran step in active support of Hezbollah? Will Trump get the deal or the memorandum he wants with Iran? Tell us in the comments below. And if you haven't, consider subscribing to our channel as well. I'm Biresh Banerjee in Berlin. Thanks so much for watching. Goodbye.